Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's show. I'm your host, Zach Drew. There's a few different articles I want to go over towards the top of today's show before we actually get into the main content. And once again, so for sake of time, let's get into it right now. So first article, RFK Jr. to meet leaders of processed foods industrial complex. In the article, it says RFK Jr. is America's best chance at rolling back the ultra-processed foods and food additives industry, one of the main drivers for the obesity crisis, an alarming national security threat. During a Senate confirmation hearing in January, JFK Jr. told lawmakers, "Something is poisoning the American people. And we know that the primary culprits are changing food supply, a switch to highly chemical, intensive processed foods." And then he actually said this. We're not going to play the video for the sake of time, but this is what he said. I think it was a fascinating statement. Just think about this with me. He said this: "When my uncle was president, only 3% of America was obese. Today, it's over 70%. Epidemics are not caused by genes. Genes may provide the vulnerability, but you need an environmental toxin. Something is poisoning the American people." The meeting marked the first sit down between the new health secretary and representatives from the processed foods industrial complex. Next article, CDC plans study into vaccines and autism. You may have seen this article. I want to add some additional thoughts to this. It says within the article, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is preparing to undertake a large-scale study into the relationship between vaccination and autism. You saw the statement that was going around the news feeds a few days ago. CDC will leave no stone unturned in its mission to figure out what exactly is happening. And my statement that I'd like to say is, are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? I don't really trust the CDC. I don't know. Maybe you do. And at this stage, it's unclear what the involvement of Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., will be in the study. I'd like to think that he's going to be involved in a great capacity. At this stage, it's still unclear. We know through his books that he has published that he absolutely believes that there is a link between that and autism. Data and statistics on autism spectrum disorder. I'm actually going to pull this up on my computer now. This is from cdc.gov. Data and statistics on autism spectrum disorder. First little bullet point about, oh my gosh, I know we've seen this, but every time I see it, it's just like, golly, 1 in 36 children has been identified with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, according to estimates from CDC's Autism and Development Disabilities Monitoring Network. Go ahead and scroll down. Identified prevalence of ASD. And let's just put on the screen the part that says 2020. So 2020, 1 in 36. 2 years before that, 2018, 1 in 44. A little worse, huh? Or a little better, 2016, 1 in 54. 14, 1 in 59. 2012, 1 in 59. 2010, 1 in 68. 2008, 1 in 88. 2006, 1 in 10 kids had autism. 2004, 1 in 125 kids. 2002, 1 in 150 kids had autism. Surveillance year 2020, 1 in 150. Do you guys see that? I mean, like, now show the whole thing. Every couple of years, it's drastically changing. What the heck is going on? Now, many researchers and analysts have projected that autism rates could hit 1 in 20, 1 in 10, or even worse within the next couple of decades. Some say by 2035 or 2040, it could be 1 in 2 children. Yes, half of the kids, half of the people in this nation, if nothing changes. This extreme projection comes from people like Dr. Stephanie Seneff, who is an MIT senior research scientist. She warned that autism could reach 1 in 2 by 2032 if toxic exposure, particularly from glyphosate and vaccine adjuvants, if they aren't addressed. Why the rise? Why? Now, the professionals, they give a few explanations. Better diagnosis and broader criteria, yes, partially true. Right? Some people went undiagnosed, yes, partially true. But that doesn't explain the full spike. I mean, whenever you go back to the 1970s and 1 in 10,000 children were diagnosed with autism, yes, better diagnosis and broader criteria. So maybe the number wasn't quite 1 in 10,000, but it wasn't anywhere even close to where we are today. I mean, think about it. What was the quote from RFK about obesity? When my uncle was president, only 3% of America was obese. Today, it's over 70%. Do you know why there isn't like all this crazy research that's been done to disprove that? You want to know why? Because most people in America have something called eyeballs. We can just look around and see, yeah, we're a lot fatter today. And I am a fat man, and I understand, and I'm talking about it. Okay? We have eyeballs. That's why we can see that 3% of America was obese just a few decades ago, and now over 70%. And the same way, something is happening. It was 1 in 10,000. If you want to take in the better testing, okay, fine. Put that number down a bit. But even whenever the testing was great in 2000, 1 in 150, now it's 1 in 36. Now some of the experts, even the top tier people of our community, scientists from MIT, are saying that by the early 2030s, it could be 1 in 2. This is absolutely insane. So why the rise? Oh, I think it's environmental toxins could be it. Pesticides, plastics, food additives, heavy metals like aluminum and mercury in the jabs that we get. Something else could be gut microbiome damage, overexposure to wireless radiation and EMFs, mass jab schedules at early ages without long-term safety studies on the full schedule combo. I think the bottom line is even weary or cautious experts admit that the numbers are trending upward fast, very fast. And if we don't start reversing this trend, we are looking at a future where in 1 in 2, entire generations are going to struggle neurologically. And the burden on families, and I say burden, and every life, every child is a gift from God. But it can still be a burden, and it's not your fault. 99.9%, it's not your fault. We can't be judged for what we don't know. We didn't know that these things were in the 80s and 90s, what these jabs were doing, we didn't know about all the absolutely horrible things, literally toxic chemicals that we consume every day that contribute to these things. We didn't know these things. And it can be a burden. But we also know that God's grace is sufficient, but it's a burden. Not only can it be on families, but think about schools. 1 in 2, what would they do? What type of burden would that place, right? Or even on the healthcare world, that would be an unimaginable burden. Those are just a couple of things I wanted to talk about up top on the program. Before I switch gears to the main thing that I really wanted to discuss on today's program, I do want to say we need your help if you can go to ZachDrewShow.com and click that bright orange donate button. If you're watching us faithfully every week, we need your help. We've had a lot of people, a ton of people, over these last couple of years drop off their recurring giving. And we're having to do even bigger fundraisers to make up for it. But what we need is recurring givers. And if you're giving and you're in a position where you can add to it, please do it. Go to ZachDrewShow.com and click that bright orange donate button. You can either donate there through Tithely or PayPal, or write us the old-fashioned way, Zach Drew Show, P.O. Box 797, Decatur, Illinois 62525. We really need some people to step up if we're going to be able to continue this. All right, here we go. So I want to just simply say this article really quickly, and then we're going to bring it back in a few minutes. Here's the article. Commerce Secretary Lutnick says Trump wants to eliminate taxes for Americans making under $150,000 a year. Now that's that is really smart. And I'm going to be explaining why, because this has to deal with the tariffs once again. And we see the things that are happening right now. Governments are being slashed. Foreign aid is collapsing. 83% of it has been wiped out. We're seeing in the news that the right people are starting to panic. Tariffs are ramping up. Trade wars are intensifying. We're seeing the federal system is beginning to fracture in ways that we haven't seen in generations. A lot is on the horizon. And so I'm going to get to that article in a second and tie it into what this is. So here's two quick articles. Trump takes Canada trade war to another level with scathing message announcing additional tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. Here's another article. Trump says tariffs against Mexico and Canada may go higher in the future. Globalists have been ripping us off. A couple of quick lines from this article. From Trump, this country has been ripped off from every nation in the world, every company in the world. We've been ripped off at levels never seen before, and what we're going to do is get it back. When asked if he expected the U.S. to experience a recession this year, Trump responded, "I hate to predict things like that." So not great news, not great news. And this is what he said. And we need to understand this. And I've been talking about this since I said, if Trump is elected, expect a couple of years of some hardships where things are going to increase in price because of what he's trying to establish in this nation. And here he said, this is a recession. I don't know. I hate to predict things like that, but let me tell you this. There is a period of transition, he said, because what we are doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America. That's a big thing, Trump said. And there are always periods of, it takes a little time. It takes a little time. But I think it should be great for us. I think it should be great in typical Trump language. What I have to do is build a strong country. You can't really watch the stock market. If you look at China, they have a 100-year perspective. We go by quarters. And you can't go by that. You have to do what is right. So in other words, these tariffs will likely make things a little more difficult for the average Joes like you and I. When Trump was running and proposing these tariffs, I was saying then, this translates to a difficult period for you and I, but that it would be worth it. Let me make this as simple as possible. I know 90% of you understand this, but let me make this as simple as possible. Tariffs can make things more expensive in the short term because companies often pass those extra costs onto consumers, onto you and I. So yes, prices on certain imported goods will rise. But here's the big picture. Those tariffs leveling the playing field, they protect American jobs. They bring back manufacturing back home. And they make us less dependent on foreign countries, kind of reestablishing what we are supposed to be as America. So yes, in the long run, this means a stronger economy, better wages. It means more jobs. It means a nation that can stand on its own 2 feet again. Short term equals discomfort. Long term equals independence. That's the trade-off, and it is worth it. Without it, we can last another 20 years. I'm not an economist, but maybe give or take, but put a round number on it. 20 years maybe. And we can enjoy our ignorance in bliss before it comes crashing down. Or we can restore our country back to what it was before 1913 when America shined. We can secure our nation, God willing, if he tarries for generations to come. And maybe some of you are watching the show and you say, Zach, why do you keep talking about this? Because I am so convinced I am so convinced that this is one of the biggest things that has happened in this nation in 150 years. But to people, as soon as you start talking about numbers, as soon as you start talking about tariffs, international trade, or even the bad banking cartel, they either tune it out because, well, finance is for the finance guys, or they already know, the banking industry is evil. But that is such a surface way to view this situation. That's not critical thinking. That's not seeing the forest through the trees. Let's make America great again, right? I agree. And it's not make America great. It's make America great again when it was great, how it used to be. And you have to go further back than the 1980s, the 1970s. You have to go back before 1913. That's whenever we started on borrowed time in America. And many think that this, whenever we think about, making America great again, the things that come to mind, the things that even come to my mind, are things that are really important to me, right? Like, getting postmodernism out of schools, right? Make America great again. We got to get that junk out of the schools. I agree. Or kicking guys out of competing against girls, in sports. Make America great again. More rights, more parental rights. Stop with all this woke stuff. I don't need a transgender to be represented in the Disney cartoon my child is watching. I don't need an unqualified DEI hire flying my plane. Make America great again. We think of things like, stop the censorship of shows like mine on major platforms. Let us have our freedom of speech to discuss things without having our First Amendment stifled. Make America great again. And, another thing would be, don't make us Christians in America feel like we're the problem, as if we're so privileged because of our religion and by our very existence, oppressors of the world that are nothing but evil colonizers. These are the changes most people think of when they hear, let's make America great again. They just think, let's get the woke stuff. Let's get the woke crap out of here. But these are all side effects of the root problem where all of this, we say train up a child in the way they ought to go, and when they get old, they will not depart from it. You know who those children are? You, me. It's not like this generation right now. It is them too. But as soon as the federal education system has, federal control of everything, the universities, everything, we are that product. They have trained us up. So it's like we have such a narrow way of thinking about it. The things that we're seeing, that the common MAGA is saying, we've got to get back to the basics. To get back to the basics, you've got to go to the stinking roots, which is the federal government. And I fight for these things and against these things, that list I just said, on almost every episode of the Zach Drew Show. And if you thought these things, weren't unbelievably important to me, then there's something wrong with you, right? Because while those things are absolutely connected, and I talk fast in my program because we don't have the money to do 2 programs a week. I could slow down a lot if someone wanted to say, hey, I got you, bro. Maybe you're out there. But these things, this list of things of, they are all connected to making America great again at a foundation level. Restoring America, though, means this. It means restoring freedom to the American people. And that's a federal thing. To do this, the federal government must become less powerful, less invasive. And it's all connected to these tariffs and what Doge is doing and what Marco Rubio is doing. The possible recession, short term. We're in a transition period because they can't reveal it all. I look at everything that's said and I understand the things that this administration is doing for optics, but I really feel I have a clear understanding of what they're truly doing. You see, we pride ourselves on freedom in America, our rugged individualism, making our own decisions, raising our families according to the convictions that God gave us. But the thing is that we say we're free, but we are shackled with chains. Chains from our king, the federal government, and from the banking cartel that funds their tyranny. To fix the problems in America, you must start at the root. And you have to dig deep and gut it. Think about this as an analogy. America is a tree that many of us can see is dying, but it's not dying naturally, but it's decaying with disease. This diseased, dying tree is not just decaying, okay, which is natural, but rather infecting. And if you don't get to the root of it, the entire grove starts dying, slowly and silently. That is what we are seeing. The effects of the federal government's overreach of power in every facet of our lives and the burden of 21st century slavery through taxation are signs of this disease spreading. When you remove a tree by the root, you have to tear up the ground. It can be messy, or as Trump calls it, a transition period. It's ugly. But if you want to save the grove, it's what has to be done. And this is exactly why Trump's tariffs and his plans to take power away from the Federal Reserve, to end or even reduce federal income tax, and to support this nation through tariffs instead, matter so much. This is why gutting Washington, D.C., and like I said, things like, the Department of Education, making moves to transfer power back to the states by making these things, here in America with all the tariffs. Well, it'll change everything. Because this isn't about economics, it's about restoration. It's about ripping out the infected roots and rebuilding the nation the way it was originally intended to be. And if we're serious about restoring America, this is where it starts. It starts right here. Rubio announces 83% of U.S. aid programs canceled. Musk calls it tough but necessary. Pulling the plug on the global money funnel, a globalist redistribution scheme. And Elon Musk is right to applaud this. And I say, shut more of it down. Cut the roots, not just the branches. This is how you shrink the size of government and return the power of the wealth back to the American people. Like Trump said, prepare for economic transition period as tariffs take effect. It might hurt for a bit. And that's why I think it's so strategic of him now to circle back to that article. Who is it going to hurt the most? It's not going to hurt those who are incredibly well off. It's going to hurt the average Joe. And that's why I think it's so strategic, saying, hey, you know what? I understand that this transition period is going to hit you hard in the pockets. And that's why Commerce Secretary Lutnick says Trump wants to eliminate taxes for Americans making under $150,000 a year. You see, they're looking at what they're doing and all the pros and the cons, and they're looking at the optics of who's going to be upset. Not just people that are not a part of his base, but even a part of his base. Because money speaks. It does. And so even if you're for Trump and you're like, man, I'm really having a hard time affording groceries. This stinks. I don't know if I can keep doing this. He's trying to plan for all those scenarios. Because if you're making, $500,000, $1 million a year, unless you're just a bad spender, bad saver, these things shouldn't really affect you much. You'll feel it some, but not much. It's the people that are making, 30, 40, 50, Social Security, 60, 100,000. And that's why they're floating this idea of $150,000 or less, no taxes. It's pretty smart. So I'm running out of time, and I'll just say a couple quick things. So what does this all mean? It means that the tide is turning, that the pruning has begun, the diseased roots are being dug up. It's messy, it's uncomfortable. There will be a transition period, but what we are watching is the beginning of something powerful. And don't fear the shaking. Try to embrace it, because the shaking is necessary to break what was never meant to be rooted in this land. And we're not just we're not just trying to make America better. We're trying to make America free again. That is when we actually have the power again. We've got to pray for this to happen. And by the grace of God, let's restore this nation for the glory of God and the good of generations to come. I'm going to read a couple quotes, some old school quotes, and then I'm going to wrap it out. Here's a quote from Alexis de Tocqueville. America is great because she is good, and if America ceases to be good, America will cease to be great. You see, Alexis de Tocqueville marveled at America's moral compass rooted in faith and community, not government mandates. This greatness came from individual virtue, not centralized power. The health of a democratic society may be measured by the quality of functions performed by private citizens. You see, he saw that America thrived because citizens, not bureaucrats, carried the responsibility of shaping society. Here's another quote from Thomas Jefferson. And you got to ask yourself, can these quotes even be said today? The government that governs least governs best. Jefferson's vision was clear. Freedom flourishes when government steps back. Can you imagine him seeing today's sprawling federal bureaucracy? Here's another quote. When the people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. This was the heartbeat of the American Revolution. Compare that to today, where the government uses surveillance, regulations, and taxations to keep us in check. James Madison, father of the Constitution, could he say this today? The powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. Madison would be horrified to see how this balance has been obliterated. The federal government now dictates everything from healthcare to education. John Adams, our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Adams recognized that freedom requires virtue. Today, with the erosion of moral foundation, the government has stepped in to legislate morality, which was never its role. Noah Webster, the Christian religion in its purity, in the basis, or rather the source of all genuine freedom in the government. Liberty wasn't just political, it was spiritual. The founders knew that faith and freedom were intertwined, a truth that modern secularism has tried to erase. Frederick Douglass, the life of the nation is secure only while the nation is honest, truthful, and virtuous. Douglass celebrated America's ideals, even as he fought against its flaws. He believed in America's potential when anchored in truth, not government manipulation. Daniel Webster, hold on, my friends, to the Constitution and to the Republic for which it stands. Miracles do not cluster it, and what has happened once in 6,000 years may not happen again. Webster knew that America was a miracle, a rare flame of liberty in a world of tyranny. Today, that flame is flickering under the weight of federal overreach. Why these quotes matter today? These statements couldn't be made today without sounding like a radical, rebellion because we no longer live under that system that they praised. America was unique. Why? Because of limited government, individual sovereignty, moral foundation rooted in faith, and economic freedom without oppressive taxation. The very success of the American experiment was hijacked by those who used that prosperity to justify more control. And we traded liberty for security. And now we have neither. And we have entered into a transition period. That is why I've been talking about this. Because people think, oh, this is just politics is normal. No. This is one of the biggest shiftings that this country has experienced in over 100 years. That's where we are. I want to thank you for tuning in to my analysis and going deep on the news that matters to you. Once again, I'm going to ask you to support us. We need a lot, honestly. I mean, that sounds a funny way to say it, but we need a lot. And if we're going to continue moving forward, we need monthly recurring. I mean, gosh, even if you're not supporting the show and you tune in each week, just even $10. If we could have a whole bunch of people do that, that would save us. Because I can't talk about everything that's going on. I'll share it in the next few months to come, but there's some shiftings taking place. And for us to, I'm trying to be careful what I say. We want to move and expand. And we feel like there's some incredible opportunities that aren't even possible for us right now because we're struggling to even just maintain. So like for this this thing that could possibly happen that would be really huge for us, that could really cause us to grow. We've got to at least come back to where we can maintain before we can build up to that next phase. So we need your help. Get involved. Go to zachdrewshow.com and click that bright orange donate button and become a generous monthly recurring partner. And if you already donate and you're in that realm where the current economic crisis isn't affecting you, please consider adding on to what you're already doing. Hey, I love you guys and I appreciate you. I'm doing this because I feel the Lord has asked me to do this. It'd be a lot easier to not do this and just do real estate full time. If it was all about money, that's what I would be doing. For those that know my background, my dad's a big real estate guy, and I do a little real estate on the side. But I'm telling you, if it was all about money for me, that's all I'd be doing. But I feel called of God to do this, and we can't do it without you. We can't do it without God, and we can't do it without His faithful people standing with us. Get involved today. I'll see you next week.